Antarctica is the last place on Earth that seems to belong to no one. It is a continent 1.5 times larger than Europe, buried beneath ice nearly 3,000 feet thick, where winter temperatures can fall below -112 degrees Fahrenheit, where the sun vanishes for half the year, and where the wind can strike with enough force to knock a man from his feet. There are no cities here, no highways, no permanent people, only ice, stone, snow, and a silence so vast it feels almost ancient. Along the coast, scientific stations sit like faint specks on an endless white map. Officially, Antarctica is a realm of peace and science. In 1959, 12 nations signed the Antarctic Treaty, declaring that the continent could not be used for military purposes, that its mineral wealth could not be exploited, and that no new territorial claims would be recognized. On paper, it sounds noble, almost idealistic. 12 nations, including the United States and the Soviet Union, two powers standing at the edge of nuclear confrontation, suddenly agreed to protect a frozen continent of ice and penguins. But the deeper question remains: why? Why did the most powerful nations on Earth reach such a swift and rare agreement over a place they claimed had no strategic value? In that same era, they could not agree on disarmament. They could not agree on space. They could not agree on Berlin. Yet somehow, within months, they agreed on Antarctica. That alone should make us pause. When governments become unusually quiet about a place, history suggests there may be something beneath the silence. And with Antarctica, the silence may be far heavier than we imagine. Today, we are entering 6 secrets hidden within the planet's most mysterious continent, discoveries that have been measured, documented, and confirmed, yet remain strangely absent from ordinary conversation. The first is Lake Vostok. Beneath the Antarctic ice sheet, almost 2.5 miles down, lies a colossal freshwater lake, roughly 155 miles long and 31 miles wide. It is larger than many nations would ever expect a hidden lake to be. For at least 15 million years, Lake Vostok has been sealed away from the outside world. The last time sunlight touched its waters, human beings did not exist, and even the great apes had not yet appeared. Soviet scientists first detected something unusual in the 1960s, when airborne radar revealed strange patterns beneath Vostok Station. But only in the 1990s did satellite radar expose the outline of a vast buried lake. The revelation was staggering. A world untouched for 15 million years was still there, waiting beneath the ice. The question was no longer whether it existed. The question was what might still be alive inside it. Perhaps it is an entire ecosystem, one that evolved beside our own world, but under rules we have never witnessed. So the race began to drill through the ice and reach the water below. The Russians had been drilling there since the Soviet era, slowly, painfully, in conditions almost beyond imagination. At Vostok Station, temperatures had fallen to -128 degrees Fahrenheit, the coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth. The drill descended inch by inch through the ancient ice. Then in 2012, after years of effort, it finally reached the surface of Lake Vostok. The world waited for answers. But what followed was strangely quiet. The results from the water samples were released carefully, slowly, in fragments, with long delays and little explanation. Officially, scientists reported traces of bacteria in the water, and little more. No great revelation, no hidden world, just bacteria. A simple answer, almost too simple for a lake sealed away for 15 million years. But people close to the project began to speak in a different tone. According to unofficial reports, some samples contained DNA that could not be matched to any known species. Not bacteria, not archaea, not viruses, and not anything listed in existing databases. One microbiologist who had worked with the samples reportedly told a journalist in private that certain findings had been requested to remain unpublished. He did not say who made the request or why. At the same time, American researchers drilling toward another buried Antarctic lake, Lake Whillans, also found life. Yet their descriptions were cautious, restrained, almost guarded. So, what was Lake Vostok hiding? Was it only a simple organism surviving in darkness beneath the ice, or was it something that challenged the boundaries of what we believe life can be? The scientists said little. Governments said nothing. And after enormous expense and effort, the drilling slowed soon after contact with the water. It left the uneasy impression that someone, somewhere, had decided it was wiser not to look too deeply. The second mystery lies beneath Wilkes Land. In 2006, satellites measuring Earth's gravitational field detected a vast anomaly under the Antarctic ice sheet. It was nearly 300 miles wide, a region where gravity differed sharply from the land around it. Something immense and heavy rests beneath miles of ice, and it appears to have been there for an almost unimaginable span of time. Mainstream science offers a dramatic explanation. It may be the scar of a gigantic asteroid impact from around 250 million years ago, near the end of the Permian period. If true, it would be the largest impact crater on Earth, several times larger than Chicxulub, the crater linked to the death of the dinosaurs. Perhaps this buried wound triggered the Permian extinction itself, erasing 96% of marine life. It is an elegant theory, terrifying in its simplicity. One collision, one hidden crater, and the greatest mass death in Earth's history. But perhaps that explanation is too convenient. A crater is named, and suddenly every question is supposed to disappear. The problem is that no human eye has ever truly seen this crater. It remains buried beneath miles of ice, inferred through gravitational data, and data, however precise it may seem, can still be interpreted through more than one lens. Some researchers have quietly noted that the anomaly does not behave exactly like a typical impact crater. Its shape appears too regular, too symmetrical, almost too clean. A violent asteroid strike usually leaves behind a chaotic wound, broken rock, uneven edges, and debris scattered in every direction. But this formation is described as nearly circular, unnervingly precise. One geophysicist, speaking anonymously, once suggested that it looked less like something made by impact and more like something shaped by intention. Of course, that is a dangerous sentence in science. It sounds too extraordinary, too close to the border between evidence and imagination. Yet until someone drills through the ice and sees what is really there, every explanation remains only a theory. And strangely, despite the technology existing and the scientific importance being enormous, no one seemed eager to drill. The silence around Wilkes Land became part of the mystery itself. The third mystery is Blood Falls. In the dry valleys of Antarctica, one of the strangest landscapes on the continent, there are places with almost no snow or ice, only exposed stone, violent wind, and a stillness that feels older than life. From the face of Taylor Glacier, a stream of vivid red liquid pours onto the frozen ground below. It looks almost impossible. White ice, gray rock, lifeless silence, and then a wound in the glacier, bleeding into the valley. When explorers first saw it in 1911, they were stunned. At first, they suspected red algae. Later, others proposed minerals, then bacteria. But the truth proved stranger. Beneath the glacier lies an ancient saltwater reservoir, sealed away from the outside world for roughly 2 million years. Its water is loaded with iron, and when that iron-rich brine reaches the air, it oxidizes and turns red, like rust spreading across ice. Officially, the mystery is solved. The bacteria living in that hidden water survive without oxygen and without sunlight. They draw energy from iron and sulfur, feeding in a world that should seem hostile to life. But the quieter details are far more unsettling. When scientists studied the samples more closely, they found organisms with unusually complex metabolic behavior. These microbes do not merely survive in darkness. They appear to shift their chemistry according to changing conditions, using processes that once seemed impossible for life as we understood it. One microbiologist described them as organisms that force us to rewrite the textbooks. They are doing what theory once said living cells should not do. And that is where Blood Falls stops being a local Antarctic curiosity and becomes something much larger. The hidden environment beneath Taylor Glacier closely resembles conditions scientists believe may exist beneath the icy crust of Jupiter's moon Europa and perhaps beneath the surface of Mars. Cold, salty, oxygen-poor water, iron-rich chemistry, darkness, pressure, isolation. If life can endure, adapt, and even thrive beneath Antarctic ice, why could it not do the same elsewhere? This is no longer fantasy. It is an analogy grounded in measurement. That may be why Blood Falls has drawn attention not only from biologists, but from space agencies and military researchers as well. And perhaps it explains why some data appears to move more slowly into public view than it should. Because if life beneath ice is not rare, but likely, then the consequences would reach far beyond Antarctica. Science would have to widen its definition of life. Religion would have to confront a larger creation. Politics would have to face a universe that may not be empty. And perhaps, as has happened so many times in human history, someone decided that the world was not ready to hear the full answer. The fourth mystery is the so-called Pyramids of Antarctica. In 2016, satellite images began circulating online, showing formations rising from the Antarctic ice that looked uncannily like pyramids: 4 sloping sides, a sharp peak, and a base so symmetrical that the human mind cannot help but search for design. The photographs were taken somewhere deep in Antarctica's mountain ranges, and once they appeared online, they spread like wildfire. Millions of people saw them. Articles were written, videos were made, angles were measured, and comparisons with the pyramids of Giza appeared almost immediately. The resemblance was unsettling. Mainstream science responded quickly. Geologists said there was nothing mysterious here. These were nunataks, mountain peaks rising through the ice. Their sharp, triangular shapes were the result of glacial weathering. Over millions of years, wind, ice, freezing, thawing, and erosion can carve rock into surprisingly geometric forms. The Matterhorn in the Alps is often used as an example. It also looks almost like a pyramid, yet no one claims it was built by an ancient civilization. And for academic science, that was the end of the discussion. Just mountains. Just erosion. Just another case of the human mind seeing design where there is only nature. But not everyone was satisfied. Independent researchers began pointing out details that seemed harder to dismiss. One of the formations appeared to have unusually smooth edges. Natural erosion can create sharp ridges, but usually one side is more worn than the other because wind, snow, and ice rarely attack a mountain evenly from all directions. Yet in some photos, the slopes looked almost identical in angle and length, too balanced, too clean. Then came another strange detail. The base of one formation seemed to align almost exactly with the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west, reportedly within less than 2 degrees. Nature creates beauty, but it does not usually build with a compass. And then came the detail that made the story even darker. When one researcher tried to organize a private expedition to the site, permission was refused without a clear explanation. That matters because Antarctica is not completely forbidden. Tourists visit parts of it every year. Scientists work at research stations across the continent. But some regions remain sealed off, remote, restricted, and silent. So the question remains, are these just mountains shaped by ice, or is there something beneath the snow that we are not meant to see yet? And the explanations offered by authorities usually return to familiar words: environmental protection, safety, restricted access, unstable ice, avalanche danger, sudden weather. And perhaps all of that is true. Antarctica is not a place that forgives mistakes. The ice can split without warning, storms can appear out of empty sky, and a single wrong step can become fatal. Yet the coincidence remains difficult to ignore. The very region where these conical formations rise from the ice appears to fall within a restricted zone. That may mean nothing more than caution. But when a place that looks unusual from above is also a place where ordinary access becomes impossible, the mind begins to ask older and more uncomfortable questions. Is the restriction really about safety, or is there something beneath the ice that someone prefers not to explain? The fifth mystery is Operation High Jump. It remains one of the most debated stories in Antarctic history, and one of the most difficult to fit neatly into the official record. In 1946, just 1 year after World War II ended, while Europe still lay in ruins and America was only beginning to imagine peace again, Admiral Richard Byrd led the largest military expedition to Antarctica ever attempted. Its scale was astonishing. 13 ships, including an aircraft carrier, 23 aircraft, and more than 4,000 men, sailors, pilots, and Marines. This was not a quiet scientific journey with a few geologists, notebooks, and measuring tools. It looked like a military force moving toward a frozen continent that, officially, contained little more than penguins, ice, and weather stations. So why was such power sent there? The official purpose was training personnel for polar conditions and mapping the Antarctic coastline. On the surface, that explanation makes sense. The Cold War was beginning. The Soviet Union was emerging as a rival, and the polar regions were becoming strategically important. But certain details refused to settle comfortably into that version of events. The expedition was expected to last 6 to 8 months, yet it returned after only 2. Byrd abruptly shortened the operation and brought the convoy home. Official records pointed to bad weather, but this was the end of the Antarctic summer, the most favorable season for work on the continent. The explanation may be true, but it does not fully quiet the unease. After returning, Byrd gave interviews containing remarks that sounded strangely urgent. In a Chilean newspaper, he reportedly warned that Antarctica could present a serious threat to United States security and that America might one day have to confront objects capable of moving at incredible speed from pole to pole. For an admiral returning from a mapping mission, those words felt out of place. When journalists asked the military for clarification, they received only the standard answer: Admiral Byrd was expressing his personal opinion. But what did he see in that frozen silence? And what made him come home so soon? Why would a military force with an aircraft carrier and 23 planes enter the Antarctic wilderness, then suddenly turn back long before its mission was complete? That question has never truly been answered. And there is another detail, often left in the shadows. During Operation High Jump, several aircraft were lost, including at least one helicopter, and men died in the frozen air and on the ice below. The official explanation was simple: accidents caused by brutal weather and dangerous flying conditions. Antarctica can destroy machines as easily as men. But later, some witnesses suggested that the circumstances of those losses were not ordinary. Details remained unclear. Records were restricted. Some documents connected to Operation High Jump have been released, yet others still contain heavy redactions, blank passages, and classified markings that have never fully disappeared. The United States government has long maintained that this was standard procedure for military records from that era, and perhaps that is true. But when a government sends an aircraft carrier, thousands of men, and millions of dollars into what is supposedly an empty field of ice, then returns early and leaves parts of the story sealed, the silence itself begins to feel like evidence of something unresolved. The sixth mystery concerns anomalous heat and exclusion zones. In 2018, thermal imaging satellites detected an area of unusually high temperature in East Antarctica. Beneath the ice, something was warming the rock far more than the surrounding terrain. The zone was large, stretching across several square miles, a hidden pocket of warmth buried inside the coldest region on Earth. Officially, scientists pointed to volcanic activity. And in fairness, that explanation is not absurd. Antarctica does have volcanoes beneath its ice. More than 100 have been identified, and some may still be active. Heat rises from magma, warms the rock, then warms the ice above it, leaving a trace that satellites can detect. On the surface, the case appears closed. But for those who study satellite data closely, certain details are difficult to ignore. First, the anomaly does not appear to match any known volcanic system. The nearest recognized subglacial volcano lies hundreds of miles away. Explaining the heat this way is like finding a warm room in an abandoned house and blaming a fire burning in another town. Second, the shape is strange. Volcanic heating usually spreads in rounded, irregular patterns, following fractures, pressure, and molten movement underground. This heat zone, however, has been described as elongated, almost rectangular, with boundaries that seem unusually clear. Nature can create astonishing forms, but clean edges beneath miles of ice invite deeper questions. Third, the temperature appears remarkably stable. It does not seem to rise and fall with the seasons, daylight, or solar activity. Even volcanic systems shift over time. They breathe, pulse, and change. But this warmth remains steady, even, and persistent, as though it were coming not from a restless geological wound, but from something constant, something quietly operating beneath the Antarctic ice. The satellite data was released to the public, but only briefly. A few weeks later, the images vanished from the database. Not all of them. Only the frames covering the anomaly. The official explanation was simple: a technical error during a database update. Later, the images returned. But something had changed. The resolution was lower, the details were softer, and the structure that had drawn attention in the first place was now much harder to examine. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But the timing was almost too perfect. Around the same period, bloggers and independent researchers began noticing other strange things on Antarctic maps. Some areas appeared blurred. Others looked washed out, hazy, or covered by a thin white layer that clearly sat on top of the original satellite image. The official explanation was again reasonable: photographing polar regions is difficult. Low sunlight, ice reflection, snow cover, and atmospheric distortion can all affect image quality. And that is true. But it does not answer the uncomfortable question. Why are only certain squares blurred? Why are nearby areas sharp while one specific patch is hidden? Why does an empty continent need selective masking? A former analyst who worked with commercial satellite imagery later claimed in a podcast that some coordinates must be processed before public release. According to him, these lists include military installations, restricted facilities, and certain locations in Antarctica. He could not reveal exact coordinates because of confidentiality agreements. But even the idea is disturbing, because Antarctica is supposed to be different. By treaty, it is a continent reserved for peace and science. No cities, no permanent population, no official secret empire under the ice. And yet, some places remain inaccessible. The theories are endless. Secret Cold War bases, hidden resource deposits, oil, gas, rare minerals, something older, something buried. Something governments are not ready to discuss. Some explanations are practical. Others are almost impossible to believe. But the strange pattern remains. Images disappear. Maps are blurred. Expeditions are denied. Scientists are kept away from certain zones. And every question receives the same cold answer. Nothing to see here, just ice and penguins. When all these pieces are placed together, the picture becomes unsettling. Not because one theory proves everything, but because too many doors seem to close at the exact moment someone tries to look inside. Although each discovery alone is enough to trouble the mind, the deeper problem is the pattern. Beneath the Antarctic ice lies a lake sealed away for 15 million years, where samples were taken and certain results appear to have been handled with unusual secrecy. There is a massive gravity anomaly nearly the size of half of France, yet no urgent drilling campaign, even though the crater linked to the death of the dinosaurs has been examined for generations with intense scientific enthusiasm. There are bacteria living in a blood-red stream in the middle of a white desert, surviving through biochemical processes that seem to challenge the limits of what life is supposed to do. There are pyramid-shaped formations in zones the public cannot freely enter, and no explanation that fully satisfies the curiosity they provoke. There was a military expedition with an aircraft carrier that returned early, after losing aircraft and men, whose commander later spoke of strange threats to national security. And then there is a rectangular heat anomaly beneath the ice, a signal so steady and peculiar that even the satellite imagery around it seems to become uncertain at the exact moment we most want clarity. Each event can be explained on its own. The bacteria are an evolutionary anomaly. The gravity disturbance is a meteorite crater. The pyramids are only mountains carved by wind. Byrd was simply an eccentric admiral with a talent for dramatic language. The satellite image is just a technical error. And sometimes a red waterfall is only iron rusting in the air. Taken separately, none of it proves anything. But when these fragments are placed side by side, a different image begins to emerge. Behind each explanation, there seems to be the same quiet instruction. Trust the official story and do not ask too many questions. Antarctica is the only continent without permanent residents, and perhaps that is why its silence has endured for so long. It has no cities to remember, no witnesses to speak, no ordinary life pressing against the sealed doors. Only ice, wind, and the lingering possibility that beneath the coldest place on Earth, history may not be finished with us yet. Antarctica is not frightening because it is cold. It is frightening because it is silent. Beneath its ice may be nothing more than rock, water, bacteria, and the slow machinery of geology. Lake Vostok may hold only ancient microbes. Wilkes Land may be only a scar from a forgotten impact. Bloodfalls may be only iron turning red in the air. The pyramids may be only mountains shaped by wind. Operation High Jump may be only military history, and the blurred thermal zones may be nothing more than flawed data. And yet, every missing record, every restricted region, every image that loses clarity just when it becomes interesting, deepens the same question. If there is nothing there, why does humanity hesitate to look too deeply? We live in an age of satellites, artificial intelligence, ice-penetrating radar, and machines that can reach other worlds. Yet there are still places on our own planet that make us lower our voices. Perhaps the missing instrument is not technology, but humility. Like Antarctica, the human heart is buried beneath layers of ice formed by desire, greed, fear, and ignorance. Only when we cultivate morality, choose goodness, and return to our truest nature can that inner ice begin to crack. And perhaps then, the secrets of the world will no longer feel so distant. If this journey into Antarctica left you with questions, share your thoughts in the comments. What do you believe sleeps beneath the ice? And if you want to keep exploring the hidden chapters of our world, subscribe, because some mysteries are not waiting to be solved. They are waiting for us to become ready.